Welcome to Industrial Marketing Collective Live. I'm Peyton Warren, Marketing Director at the Industrial Marketing Agency Gorilla 76, and I am one of your IMC Live hosts with our friend Alan here. We've also got a lovely co-host joining us today in Nihal Shetty. Hey, Nihal.
Hey guys.
Alan, Nihal, and I are diving into one of the most impactful tools in your marketing toolbox, your email nurturing campaigns today. These campaigns are not just about sending emails, they're about building relationships, driving engagement, guiding your audience along their customer journey. Email nurture campaigns are really critical for keeping your brand top of mind with your audience and delivering personalized content that resonates. We think that sometimes we sleep on the email nurture campaign. We think of them as just something that's, you got to do it and you just kind of like passively push it through. But we're here today to maybe reconsider that and think about how we can do these campaigns better. So we're going to explore the why and how behind successful email nurture campaigns, from everything from audience segmentation to anything that y'all bring up in the chat. So feel free to drop your notes. So grab your coffee. Let's dig in and kick it off.
Yeah.
Alan, where should we start?
Well, I think we should start with the place you've already kind of dipped a toe into, which is that Gorilla, for our longtime fans, has maybe had a inconsistent, let's say, relationship with email as a go-to tactic. I know when I started here 5 years ago, almost all my clients were doing email. And then it's felt like as I got new clients, we slowly had fewer and fewer of them doing it. And now we're building back up on them. So Peyton, could you maybe give us your take on how we've evolved on email over the years?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because we're obviously a marketing agency at Gorilla. And so like our perspective on what marketing activities drive the most impact is different than what an in-house marketer might think. And like what we're talking about here is marketing for manufacturing companies, industrial marketing. So we're talking about in-house marketing, like what should you be doing? And so you might have an agency like Gorilla that at some point's like, yeah, email nurture isn't the most impactful thing that we could be doing for you. That doesn't mean that it's not impactful and it's something that you should ignore. And so I think that for a while we were really interested in the scale and the frequency of touches that you get with something like social media and demand generation. And we still are, but that's not the solution for everybody. So I think something you're going to hear on IMC Live a lot, and that you'll hear in basic anywhere that you talk to any informed marketer, is that it always depends on your situation. It depends on your audience. It depends on the type of content that you're putting out. And, you've got contact lists, you do. And if you're ignoring them, if you're not doing something with them to nurture those people that have already opted in and like shared their email with you in some way, you're kind of ignoring them at your own detriment. So I don't know. It's just it's something you don't want to sleep on. And yeah, Alan, we're definitely pulling it back in to a lot of like the programs that Gorilla has been running for our clients. And that's why we had Nihal and yourself on today, because we're doing some work.
Yeah. Let's bring a Nihal in on that. Nihal, what do you feel like email nurturing gives you an opportunity to do that's unique to, this deliverable?
Yeah, that's a good question, Alan. I think that what email has allowed me to do, especially for clients that are like writing, for example, a monthly email, right? It kind of gives me a similar sense of testability that you can get. That's not really a word, testability, but it gives me a similar ability to test things that you can do with like paid social, right? So for example, like with email, every single email, especially for a monthly email, like what I would suggest is making it as short and as brief as possible, right? I think that there's different kinds of emails that work for different kinds of clients, as Peyton has talked about, right? Like, for example, if you are a client or if you are a company that has a really in-depth consultative process and you do a lot of thought leadership, things like this, then maybe you can get away with sending a really with a longer email because that's what people are looking for you to do, right? They're looking for you as an expert in this kind of space. But for example, if you are a client, like the client I write monthly emails for, that you're more of a commodity distributor, people don't really necessarily want to hear, or they're not, the range of like thought leadership you can do is a little bit slimmer as a commodity focused distributor, right? And so I think what I've been able to do with that is like test lines of humor, test video versus text. And really what I've really come down to is what works for example, for this commodity distributor is like very, very brief, very kind of funny, sort of quirky emails that are really just a few sentences. And those can drive really high click-through rates, right? It might not be the same for your list, right? But it's kind of a question of give yourself 8 months to figure out what works, test a whole bunch of things, and at the end, you'll kind of start hitting consistent numbers that are pretty impressive, and that can be really useful for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's some of these companies they sell commodities. You know, if you sell something that somebody else makes and it's pretty comparable, it's like, what's the point of emailing, right?
Mhm.
To stay top of mind, to give them a pathway to talk to you, to remind them that you exist.
Mhm.
Like, I always think about the haircuts. Like, you don't always need a haircut. I did just get mine cut. Yes, thank you for noticing. But when you get an email every 6 weeks from your salon of choice, you might ignore it. You might say, no, I'm growing it out, whatever. But eventually you're like, oh yeah, I need to make that haircut appointment. And when they have that button that just gets delivered straight to your inbox, right there you click and you move forward. And so I think that's kind of what you've been experiencing with uh, this commodity supplier that you're mentioning, Nihal, is like you just keep showing up and giving them an option.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and hopefully also showing up in a way for those who are more frequent openers to continue to gain value from it by sharing content and other things that is going to be useful to them, as well as help you build trust and credibility so that you are a more valued source of information and hopefully eventually source of product. And Nihal, how do you feel about that balance there, trying to provide value with every email?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the goal for, like, for example, a monthly email, it should be that like people get a little bit excited when they see your name in the box, right? And I know that's a really high bar to clear, right? I mean, you might get excited if you see a long lost friend that you haven't heard from in 4 years in your email inbox, but like a commodity distributor, I mean, it's a little bit tougher, right? And so I think that for me, what it comes down to is like using email as a place to really solidify brand voice and like have an identity. This is the time to really sound friendly and personable and not be like throwing 400 different deals at someone or, getting too crazy with like uh all the things that you have on offer, right? It should feel like a personal message. Like it should feel very cohesive, very tightly woven. Um, and the structure of like a joke can be useful for that, right? Like if it's like football season, for example, and if you want to turn all of your products into little football players and make a nice little image out of that, that can be useful and that can be fun and that can be kind of a something that someone can look forward to in their email inbox. But like honestly, and also to be honest, like the bar for humor isn't super high in industrial marketing, right? Like as long as you're a little bit clever and funny, that's kind of that's good enough for a lot of the work that we do here because it brightens someone's day just briefly. So
And I think that's just like that's one example, right? Of like something that you could be doing is like these little brief blurbs that get sent out. But like emails, offers still do have a place with email, right? I guess like what other types of emails do y'all like to send besides just like a recurring newsletter, or what type of content do you like to include? in your newsletters?
Yeah. I mean, I love trade show emails, right? So I love like the idea of every trade show, well, not maybe not every trade show you have, depending on how many trade shows you go to, right? But if you have a big trade show this year, right? It's a great idea to send like a sneak preview email, like a post trade show email, this kind of thing, and give people who didn't have a chance to like see you on the floor sort of like a place to see what you were talking about. It's also nice because like those trade show emails, they're really rooted in like a sense of place and time, which can make it a little bit more interesting than an email that's sort of abstract. Here's a differentiator that could apply at any time of the year, any different place, right? It really feels more like a company update. So, I mean, that's another great option for email, I think, when you have a trade show coming up. Definitely.
Yeah, or other unique offers. If you have a offer that is the catch, is the hook, then promote that as an interest base to your audience, because that is something that you would assume that they are going to be very happy to hear about. So don't be afraid to sell, but I feel like you can't always sell, or else it just becomes like
Mm-mm.
it just becomes a product catalog eventually. So you have to be able
Yeah.
to provide that subject matter expertise and something outside of that. Otherwise, they would just go to your product page every day.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like these different types of emails that you're sending, this is also just kind of like pulling it back into like your CRM and like how you're managing your list. You definitely want to give people options of what sort of information they're opting into, because if you don't create different like subscription types, then if someone gets an email from you that's about, you know, this is 20% off, and they're like, I don't want it. They'll just, the only option is unsubscribe from all. And then now they're never going to see any of your thought leadership content. They're never going to know that you're coming to a trade show because they've unsubscribed. They've said, don't send me anything. So if you are going to be sending, I guess, different types of messages, or even if you're not, I would consider setting up more comprehensive subscription types. So you have something like marketing information is coming out, company updates are coming out, product information, and then you could have one that's like offers and discounts. So maybe someone unsubscribes from everything except from offers and discounts. But you know what? You still got that one in. Otherwise they're not going to see anything. Um,
Yeah, I feel like we're going to be digging into that a lot later, about how do you build a sense of community and a sense of reputability through your newsletters with specific audiences. Um, But before we dive too much into that, I was also thinking about the construction company client that we have that sent out a adorable Christmas video. And I feel like their video has become the meat of most of those newsletters, because it's a way to get more out of this thing that they put a lot of investment into with these case study videos that they do. And why not share it? It's probably the easiest way for someone to consume a case study if they're just trying to get through their inbox. Um, and then after we'd already gotten everyone very accustomed to consuming their videos, then we share a cute Christmas video that's just purely about enjoyment and associating something pleasant with the brand. Just a nice brand build move that we don't do as much, and you just don't see in B2B as much, which I thought was really nice.
yes, it's distribution. I mean, if you're creating content, be it a case study, a video, you know, if you're running something, if you're creating any sort of asset and you're just putting it on your website and sitting on your hands and hoping that like SEO brings people your way, you're really not maximizing all that effort that you just put into that content that you created. So you've got to distribute it in some way. And email is a great option because it's often free or very inexpensive, depending on like the email service you use. And you can still segment your list to give people like really relevant information, and make it feel more personalized too.
Yeah. And also, ROI tends to be a thing that we bring up eventually in these conversations. And from what I hear, email has some pretty good ROI. So Peyton, could you tell us a bit more about that, and like, when it's worth to really dig into email?
Mm. Um, well, I mean, I would say if you have a list, like I don't think your list has to be big. Um, it just has to be whatever you're sending just has to be relevant. For example, IMC Live. We have an email that we send out about this show. We tell you what the topic is, and then we send the follow up. And sometimes those emails include additional information as you scroll deeper, but we give you what you came here for at the top of those messages. When we first started this show, we were sending this list. This was like a list of, 40 people, 200 people. And we've continued to grow and nurture that list and continue to like give the people what they want, the information they came here for. And over time, that list has been able to grow because we promote the show in other ways to well over 1,000 people that now get our newsletter. Uh, but that's happened over the course of years, that we've been running this program. And so I think like if you've got, say, an industry segment and maybe you only have 4,000 contacts in your entire like email database, and maybe you segment out, telecommunications or something like that. And turns out you only, of your 4,000 contacts, you actually only know that 50 of them are in telecommunications. Well, make that email incredibly relevant to them and send it to them and just continue to like build over time, collect data, enrich your list, and go from there. But I think like if you're seeing like I guess poor open rates, if you're seeing poor click-through rates, things where you're just like lots of unsubscribes, that's a signal that you are not sending relevant content. And you should maybe reconsider your strategy. But just like industry benchmarks, actually MailChimp, I'll send this link in the chat. You have to accept their cookies, but wow, that's a really long link. You can see how I searched for it. So you can select different industries to see like what the benchmarks that MailChimp says, but average open rate, what they say you should be seeing in the manufacturing space is 29.08%. Average click-through rate of 2.8%, unsubscription rate 0.2, almost 0.3. Hard bounces probably around 0.5, and then soft bounces they say 1.67. So that's what they're saying for like industry benchmarks, and I think that's fair, but really you want to be measuring yourself against yourself.
Yeah.
So like you want to say, okay, how long have I been sending these emails? Just pick a time frame and zoom out and look at what was your open rate over that period. Okay, that's your benchmark. Now, for this next period, how are you improving? What are you doing to get that open rate up?
Yeah, I think what like Peyton's getting at here too is just that in terms of these benchmarks, another big factor is like how clean is your list, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if your list is made up of a bunch of like billing addresses, you're not gonna, I mean, that's definitely gonna impact your click-through rate and things like this, right?
Yes.
So like in terms of measuring email performance, I don't know if there's any way around it other than to consider it kind of a long game, right? You need to have a starting place for your data and you need to measure it against that starting place, right? So, I mean, it's hard to like say whether or not your email is doing well in the first, I would say in the first 5 or 6 months, frankly. Like you do need some time to like figure things out, I think. But it's worth it for sure as a nurture tool, definitely.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Nihal, you could become somewhat legendary around here for your ongoing results and improvement. So could you just tell us a little bit about your experience with those accounts and like how you found yourself getting better results over time?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely write emails for a few clients at Gorilla. I think probably more than a lot of other writers. It's just the way that my clients have ended up being. And like I would say that So for example, for like this one client that we have, and this is the commodity distributor that I've been talking about. When when we started first writing for them, right? Like I think we started at like something around, there were a few months where like we were hitting like a 2.5, 2.8 click-through rate, maybe like a 15% open rate, maybe, and that was probably about a year ago. But now for like the past 4 or 5 months, like we've consistently been hitting 20% click-through rates at least, 25% often. We just hit a 10%, sorry, not 20%, 20% open rates at least, 25% sometimes. We just hit a 10% click-through rate, right? So this is kind of like an exponential jump up from like where we were starting. And I mean, obviously, when it comes to marketing, there's all kinds of other factors here, right? We can't say it's just the email. It could be that, something had shifted in the industry, right? And now people are looking to buy more, right? It could have to do with the election. It could have to do with a lot of things, right? But it's still a good enough data point for us to say, well, we're consistently hitting for the past 5 months, like much higher rates than what was going on at the beginning. Like, what are the changes that we've made, right? And I mean, some of this is just kind of tactical stuff. I mean, it's just kind of having subject lines that rhyme for some reason do very well, right?
Mhm.
Or having emails that are far shorter than like even originally. I mean, the first set of emails, they were never long, right? But breaking it down to really just 5 sentences essentially, right? Five really well chosen sentences. That's worked really well for the audience. Like in terms of what kinds of differentiators we're hitting, I mean, that's been another thing that we've been thinking about a lot. So I mean, that's been really useful and instructive, I think. And it definitely can feel hopeless at first, right? Like because every single time you send out an email, you're like, maybe this is gonna be the one and it's not the one. But eventually you really start like just naturally making some changes that can be really effective, I think.
You find
Um,
your voice. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, you figure it out for sure.
What's your opinion on I'll be trendy, zero click content?
Oh, I like it. I mean, I personally like it. So I guess for people who aren't familiar with that term, zero-click content is essentially, if I place instead of asking someone to like click to read the blog post from the email, right, or click to read the full case study, just lightly editing and putting that whole case study inside the email, right? In general, I'm a huge fan of zero-click content, right? Like I think especially this is an age where like people get like newsletters all the time from like some random thought leader or some random journalist who collects a bunch of news. And it's frankly I think like honestly, I think there's a subconscious association that like zero-click content is better than clicking for a blog post because like I'm so used to like hitting paywalls if I like click on links normally in emails, right? So I'm very much for zero-click content, especially when it comes for like if you're a company that's doing more consultative, more thought leadership stuff, and what your expertise, what your value proposition is your expertise. I mean, I think that's a great option, really. So
Yeah, Brennan mentioned something in the chat too, and Brennan, you're welcome to come on and chat too. But about when you're emailing distributors, like it seems like zero click content could be really good for distributors who are interested in that, informational stuff that Brennan mentioned.
Mhm.
Information about like how the products work and stuff there. If you're trying to get whoever you're trying to get to consume this information, make it as easy and frictionless as possible for them to get that information.
Well,
Most of my
I mean,
favorite newsletters are zero click for what it's worth. But I try not to treat myself as the customer. It's really hard. I always want to like divorce my opinions from like what the actual customer might want.
yeah.
But
until Brennan comes back or is able to get on and talk about that. I was wanting to also bring up, you mentioned the rhyme is right concept for your subject lines and how humor can play a big role in getting open rates up. And you
Yeah.
also mentioned something the other day that I thought was pretty important for newsletters called was it the presenter's bias?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. That's what we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could you talk about how that concept works and like how you can dilute your own newsletters or your own promotions by over describing
Yeah,
or over
definitely. Yeah, so I mean, this is something that at Gorilla, among the writers, like Alan's been organizing sort of a conversion training sort of thing. So we've all been like doing some like self-education on conversion writing and things like this. And something that really stood out to me, I've been thinking about a lot actually and I mean, this kind of sounds like common sense or intuitive, as most good ideas should sound, I think, but essentially it's called the presenter's bias, which is that like people when they see a list of qualities or features, they tend to like average them out as opposed to add them up, right? As in terms of like what their value, what their understanding the value is of something. So I mean, for example, right? Like let's say I'm selling brooms. Um, I might have one great differentiator, which is like this broom can clean the dust off itself, right? Like this is a super amazing, wonderful broom. And I might have another differentiator that says something like this broom is resistant to electricity, right? So there's some science that shows that like the description of the broom that just has the this broom is super top great at cleaning its own dust off performs much better than like someone giving a proposition for a broom that does that and is also like resistant to electricity, right? Essentially that, and this is really good information for product pages, for landing pages, for email, for essentially anything we do in marketing, right? Which is that comprehensiveness of a value proposition is actually not your best friend or is actually your enemy, frankly, when it comes to like writing convincing copy, right? In general, like we need to only be talking about one very important thing, a couple very important things, and if something feels like, oh, well, this might be useful, this might be an interesting thing to talk about, then adding it in there can actually dilute what you're already saying, right? So, yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and something else I was wanting to talk about is how you can use newsletters to build a sense of community in a sense that your brand and your experts are a member of the same ilk, the same family as the end users, and how that can add value. And then Aya in the chat mentioned how she's using her zero-click content exclusively for subscribers. And I wonder if that kind of informational sharing is part of that, trying to foster that connection and that sense of credibility with the audience. So, Aya, would you want to come on and talk about that at all?
Sure. Give me 1 second.
Aya, we have you back
Hi.
again for another year.
I know. I was looking for the link that when I emailed you. I think we send those newsletters or emails and hoping that people would come to our website and do whatever we're trying to make them do. But just to kind of build a connection, I think it's a good idea to put certain things only subscribers can see. And, as you were talking about at the beginning, putting some funny things in it, that's also actually exclusive content for our newsletter. You don't search for a blooper reel and find it on the internet. You have to subscribe to our newsletter to find it. So I think that there is a really value to sharing something you can't find elsewhere.
It creates like that inside joke.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel
definitely.
like you get a similar thing from like attending the show live, right? Like the chat is its own ecosystem, its own like community that's building there that you just don't get. Like, sure, we post the show on YouTube, but the chat, it's just here. That's it, and I think that that's one of the special things about like the live show. And that kind of translates to exactly what you're saying, Aya, of like make it feel special. And it's you don't want to, yeah, cheapen it by like copy and pasting. Like you've got to customize the content.
Yeah, you could almost think of it like the editorial section of your brand. If your website is the news, then this gives you a chance to comment on that news. Maybe even having like industry event updates that isn't just specific to your brand offerings and stuff, and how that affects your customers in ways that you can add value in that.
Some of the things that you just mentioned again relate to the blooper reel we make every month, and we do webinars several times a year. And some of the blooper reels include behind the scenes mistakes we made, when we're preparing for webinars or practicing for webinars, or before we open the floor to the public to join, we go running around and getting things, ready. And it's just, you don't get to see it if you're not part of the community, being a subscriber. So
Yeah, that's such a good way to humanize your company. And I feel like that's especially important in this B2B space where a lot of people are just, or a lot of brands are just the name and the price tag that's usually associated with them.
Yeah.
yeah, a little uptight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just here's a human element that you're gonna probably remember. Yeah, like some people's favorite parts of shows are the blooper reel at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it also goes to show too is that um I think one thing that we should make sure that we're not doing, I would say, is a mistake that a lot of companies do, is that too many people have access or control to the email list, right? So it's like marketing is sending out emails and also sales is sending out emails. And, there might be some other people who are also sending out emails. And this can make it really difficult to like create like this cohesive identity for your emails, right? Like if you send out a great email with a blooper reel and, real sense of character, and then next week, like someone from sales sends out an email that like says like 20% off of these like 3 items, right? You're not letting your audience develop a feel for what your emails should or what they should expect from your emails because they're just coming from too many different places, right? So I would say that this isn't to like disparage like sales's ability to write emails. They're very talented people, right? But just in terms of like the clarity of the voice and the strategic positioning of your email campaign, it's very important, I think, that like marketing owns it entirely as a channel and that if sales wants to write an email, for example, that it go through marketing first, just to like you can understand the consistency in tone and the consistency in style to really build that relationship with your customers for sure.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to have an established brand voice across all of your messaging. Like
Mhm.
everyone, even if someone else does have to work on it, they should have a pretty good idea what it should sound like. And if they don't, they shouldn't be on that email at all.
Yeah, I
Preferably.
think the point too that you've made, Nihal, is like having access to the list. It's like, does that email actually need to go out to everyone?
Right. Yeah.
Is it all contacts or is it a specific like segment or is it somebody that's done something in like an activity that you've measured? That sort of thing. Because yeah, you could totally turn people off.
Mhm. We had a question from Jill in the chat. Jill, would you come on and talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, so I was just curious how many people, you put add their newsletters to like the LinkedIn newsletter content. And do you see value in that? As far as because of, you're asking people to subscribe to your newsletter, but then you're also adding the same exact content on LinkedIn. So I was just curious if it's different content or if they see it's just an added, value just to get more eyes on it.
Yeah, I would echo some of like, I guess the sentiment that's already come up. And I know I just responded to your comment too. But of like making that feel exclusive, like to get the LinkedIn newsletter, to get notified about it, sure, you can like go find it anytime, but you typically are subscribing to those things. So I think that, you know, lowest like entry point would be copying and pasting and sending it. And sure, that's better than nothing. Like if that's what you've got the time for and the capacity to do at this point, copy paste a newsletter from here to there. Okay, you're distributing in 2 channels. But I do think if you can put a little bit more intention in like repurposing it for LinkedIn, then you'll see better results there. So like if you write the content for email and then for LinkedIn, it could be very similar, but making sure that they know that what they're getting here is like for this spot makes it feel a little bit more valuable too.
Right.
I'm a big fan of repurposing content though. I think most folks on this call would probably feel that way. We just don't have enough time in the day, right? You got it, like to not repurpose it. So I don't want to like say like, oh, just copying and pasting is like bad. Um, it's better than nothing, but you could be doing something incrementally better, you know?
I guess you could tease, you can do like a teasing and, you know, for more, subscribe to our newsletter, our email newsletter.
Yeah, curiosity builder.
Yeah.
Nihal, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds exactly right. I mean, I think like I repurpose. So, I mean, for the emails that I write that are like tend to be like 0-click, right? Emails, right? That's repurposed blog posts or repurposed case studies. For the emails that I write that are like funny little things that go out to clients, I mean, I post that on LinkedIn organic social, right? With just some changes to make sure it's clear that I'm not referring to the fact that this is an email. And I mean, I think that that's useful. Definitely like posting any email content on LinkedIn in any form. I think like through a newsletter is great. But also just organic posting it can also be useful because that gives people in your company a chance to share it organically themselves, right? I think like what's clear is that like a lot of people at your company, right? Well, it depends on your company, but from a lot of companies I've seen, like a lot of people want to be, you know, they want to be posting more on LinkedIn. They want to have like this thought leadership thing. A lot of salespeople really do feel that way. They're building relationships on LinkedIn and they just don't have the content to share for it, right? So posting any email content or anything like this, just with the ability for other people to talk about it online, people of your own team, you're doing them a service. And I think you're also building a relationship there. And you're ensuring the consistency of your messaging across platforms. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you should feel any kind of reservation about it in general.
Yeah. And you are, it's another channel, which means it's another pool, another audience to dip into. And you know, we love social for demand gen, and we love social for like the paid aspect of it because you can reach so many people. So to get onto that platform, you're reaching people where they spend time, their inbox, their social media platforms, you know. I think it's a win for sure.
Well, we are at 5 minutes till already. Wow. But I wanted to just ask Nihal at first, but just the group in general, what has been your most successful email so far, and what do you think did it? What was the secret sauce that allowed it to be so successful?
Oh man, that's a good question. I would say that consistently what's performed really well for me at least has been like end of year emails, I think across clients, right? So like this is the kinds of like retrospective, like 2024 kinds of things, these holiday things. I can get really creative with like, I don't know, dress up your product in a Santa hat and just like send it out to your audience, right? Like people love things like this. Um, I think like I mean, part of it's also at the end of the year for a lot of companies. I mean, sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's like, oh, I need to set down my budget like right now in November, December, right? So it kind of depends on who you are, but I would say that like, I mean, I feel two ways about seasonality, right? In terms of sometimes it can be kind of lazy to like every single month you're gonna do a 4th of July email and an Easter email and a Halloween email and a Thanksgiving email, right? I mean, you've just kind of answered all of your you've already built out a content plan without even really thinking about it. But I would say that the one place that I would say definitely take advantage of seasonality is at the end of the year because I think it's like a great place for you to sound, you know, a little bit like sentimental and heartfelt without it feeling like weird that why is this company talking about how grateful they are. So I would say in general, like it's kind of that's been pretty well performing across a lot of clients, I think for sure. Mhm.
Does
I
any
think for me, like, and I mean, I'd be interested in like the group, the whole collective here. But for me, what I think has worked best is like just general like consistency and like the type of content that you're delivering. So like they know what they're gonna get. That's why they stay. So like my unsubscribe rates have been super low because they subscribed to this specific type of content. We're holding up our end of the bargain and we're delivering that type of content over and over and over again. And I think like the secret sauce is that we make that known. So what's your stop sign when you get an email? The subject line, you know, and maybe a little preview text. So like I think it starts at the subject line. Like you have to make sure folks know that this is the email they expected to get, and it's worth them clicking in because they can trust that they're going to get more of the information they wanted. So like flagging yourself as that like repeat visitor with an emoji or something like that in your subject line. So that folks know like, oh, this is my friend, you know, who's reaching out, or, you know, it's the same like to email address constantly. I think that's one of, I guess, the little secret sauces that I like to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think mine was adding the relevance to a current event. Like it's especially difficult when you're a company that has a ton of different segments that maybe have a very different audience base culturally or business wise or however it may be. So for one of our clients that is trying to get into more of a new market, them being able to pick a very specific piece of news that had a very specific consequence to a very specific segment that they were targeting at that point, and then saying, this is what you might have heard of, and this is directly why it matters to you, and this is how this can be facilitated through us if you so choose. I think was very successful because it was both content and targeting that working together very well. But
Yeah. And I would also just say in general, like you can break a lot of like classic copywriting rules in email that you wouldn't want to do on paid social, right? So like for example, like one email that performed really well was like, here's 3 photos of 3 of our guys in forklifts on the field, like moving things around, right? Like here are their names, here's like what they're doing at the field, right? This is not something that we would normally like, I would never write a paid social ad and be like, hey, have you met like Matt from the field? Like, here's a picture of him on a forklift. I mean, that would be a really strange thing to like, it's not really directly addressing the customer. It's not really doing any of this stuff. But at the end of the day, like, it's so important to consider like the medium on which like you're producing content, right? So people are used to emails in some sense that go like, hey, here's a photo of like some guy, right? Like here's a photo of my friend, or here's my like it brings up like sweet feelings. I think it feels nice to like receive like an email that's a little bit more personal, right? So I think that that's something that you can test out. And in general, just like when it comes to writing your emails, just try a bunch of stuff and see what works. You'll learn a whole lot in the first 6 months and give yourself the runway to experiment, I think, for sure.
I know. I'm just realizing now we haven't even talked about like the difference of plain text emails or like newsletter templates or anything like that. There's so much more that we could dive into. And
part two.
yeah, I mean, like if any of this is interesting to you and you want to keep the conversation going, you know where to find us on LinkedIn and things like that. And but you can also keep the conversation going in the Industrial Marketing Collective. So if between this call and our next IMC Live, which I think is February 6th, and you want to keep the conversation going, reach out and we'll get you added to the collective and you can keep posting on the discussion boards there. One last little note that I'll add here is that another way that you can stay connected with this community is we're going to be going to Austin for the Industrial Marketing Summit. And that's just 2 months away now. So it's happening February 26th. And if you want to learn more about it, industrialmarketingsummit.com is the place to go. Thank you so much for joining Alan and Nihal today to talk about this. And special shout out to Aya for the great thoughts and the value added in the chat too.
I want to steal that blooper idea so bad.
It's not stealing. It's just, you know.
Artistic interpretation.
All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of your week and we will talk with you soon.